Blessings to whoever sees this. My name is Noah Aaron Goodbaum. I live in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I make hip-hop music under the name The Mighty Rhino.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm 26 years old, and I was born in Toronto at Women's College Hospital. I've been elsewhere, but never lived elsewhere. My father raised me in North York. I lost my mother when I was 9. She's in the kingdom now. And I am the son of Zell and Aviva Goodbaum. And I grew up, I have my brother Diggs is 36. My sister Haley and I are both 26. I've got nieces and stepsisters and what have you. And I was born with cerebral palsy, and I have a nonverbal learning disability and bipolar disorder, and depending on who you ask, Asperger's and OCD as well. I have a little eccentricity collection, I guess you could say. And so it wasn't really a sure thing that I would walk or talk, but I functioned reasonably well, and I went to school. I was a York University student for a time. I was pursuing a political science degree. Crashed and burned twice, failed out both times. There's a part of me that misses it and wants to go back, wants to meet that particular goal. But there's also a part of me that's tremendously grateful not to be doing it anymore. I live on Ontario disability support. That's sort of after a breakdown not long ago in March. That's sort of less contentious of a matter than it might once have been for me. I sort of wonder whether the right thing isn't to be working harder, to be working more concretely toward a goal which can more obviously help the world than can rap music. But I fell in love with hip-hop around the age of 13, 14, 15, even earlier, rather, because my brother, who is a very accomplished composer and arranger, as well as a great maker of hip-hop beats and the owner of an organic grocery store, Diggs. He's an extraordinary man and a wonderful man and a very profound influence on my life. He introduced me to hip-hop as a teenager, and I fell headlong in love with it, and sort of was compelled to make hip-hop. I didn't really have a choice. I had to be doing what, Outkast were doing, and Shali Tuna was doing, and E40 was doing, Mystical, and Ghostface and Raekwon and Scarface and all the rest of them. There's dozens, and I could rant about these artists and what they've meant to me, but I had to do it. I had to try to do it. I know it was an awkward situation because I'm a white kid from a relatively privileged background. I grew up in North York, which is full of nice lawns and nice Jews and not terribly much else. It's very safe and clean and a lovely place to grow up, but it's also rather bland. And so hip-hop has concerns around identity and authenticity, and very much is tied up in the particular legacy of a racialized group, black folks, and usually black folks from low-income backgrounds who have been devastated by neoliberal economics. And so coming from where I do, my father's a businessman, and my father and mother went into business together. Their company is called Viva, which was my mother's name. She was Aviva Goodbaum, and my father convinced her to call the business Viva. She sort of objected on modesty grounds to naming it after herself, but then she looked and saw it on the marquee and said, okay, it works, it's Viva. And my father sells sterling silver jewelry. So coming from relative privilege and now living on RDSP, it's sort of an awkward transition, but I sort of would like to think that I can get by on account of the fact that I'm really great at it. I make good hip-hop. I work really hard to pay tributes to my influences and to make worthy art, so that's part of what I'm doing. I struggled for so long at York University trying to do a poli-sci degree, even though I had several marvelous professors. By the end of it, my guidance counselor at York, who was called Maureen Haig, looked me in the face and said, listen, you want to maybe consider dropping out. You're obviously miserable and you might not want to continue to force yourself to do this. It's a little bit like hitting your head against a wall. There's a part of me that feels like it's the wrong thing to have dropped out because I want to be stable and maybe one day meet a partner and make sure that she's well she's safe and that I can provide the things she might need in concert with her and sort of build a life that makes sense. But there's also a part of me that's exhilarated not to be in school, and I haven't had a job in some time, a formal sort of job. I volunteer now and again at the Baha'i Center, and I've thought to get involved maybe a little bit more with, I don't know if I could ever tutor or, what am I looking for? I've also had good experiences volunteering with old folks. When my Zaidi, who had Alzheimer's, was at a convalescent home called Kamar Lodge, I used to volunteer with the people there. But at present, I mean, I'm mostly chipping away at my second album and plugging away, that is, just trying to make it the best it can be. I work with an executive producer whose name is Measuring Man, Ted Honestchuk, and he's a very accomplished producer. He's also the engineer at a studio called Silver Birch at Bathurst and Queens Quay in Toronto. And he took me on when we were both participants at a monthly hip-hop event in Toronto called Hip Hop Karaoke, which is a fun sort of event. It works like karaoke, except that it's expected that you memorize a classic hip-hop song and perform it with gusto, as if it were your song. And so I met him there, and I developed a reputation for being good at hip-hop karaoke, and he decided, listen, I'm an engineer and I used to run a label. Why don't you come into my studio and I'll see what your original work is like? And he decided to take me on as his kind of protege after that. So we put together an album. We worked on it for 18 months and released it at the tail end of 2011, beginning of 2012. It's called He Whom the Beat Sets Free is Free Indeed. In fact, I have a copyright over there that I can show you. So I put that out. It was something of a sort of minor local success. It didn't get very much play because we didn't have very much money for promotions or for marketing. It sort of felt like music these days is a spend money to make money enterprise at the best of times. And I was sheepish about spending more money than absolutely necessary to pursue what's at the end of the day a passion. So we didn't spend very much. And it was what it was. It was a local success and not much beyond that. But it was a very good work of art, I'd like to think. And so we put that together, and now we're working on a second one, because what am I going to do? You know, I love hip-hop. I'm not going to give up. I love it too much to throw in the towel. The second one's called Good Evening. My name is the Mighty Rhino, which is... When I get on stage, you know, I like to get into it, man. I like to go, good evening. My name is the Mighty Rhino. You know what I mean? Like, I go by the Mighty Rhino because I put mighty in front of my name because I want to conjure the spirit of old showmanship. You know what I mean? I got it because I saw that there was a calypso artist called the Mighty Sparrow. And I liked it. I thought the mighty, that's right, the panache, the bombast, the razzle dazzle. I want to do that. I once upon a time, a friend of mine who had seen me perform something at a Baha'i youth conference said I was the James Brown Baha'i of this generation. And I was tremendously honored by that, because that's what I want. I want the soul of James Brown and Al Green and Sam Cooke and Lee Moses and O.V. Wright and Wilson Pickett and Otis Redding and these cats. Phil Withers is one of my favorites because he does that, the plain-spoken, humble, down-home, truthful songwriting, the beautiful stuff from the soul. Aretha Franklin, you know, Ann Nesby, that shit is just, you know, to me it's the best that there is, the most glorious. And shout out to the Mountain Goats as well, and because he brings that to me as well. And I like to, connect authentically with an audience. And when I'm on stage, even though I can barely, I'm not particularly well coordinated and I wasn't supposed to be able to walk, I'm jumping up and down and I'm, shouting exuberantly into a microphone. I have that sort of Screaming Jay Hawkins on Hinge vibe and just going for it, man, I love it. And so I have a little cult following in Toronto and in some spots elsewhere, a couple hundred people, maybe 1,000 if I'm lucky as yet. There's some folks in Ottawa, some folks in Winnipeg, some folks in London, some folks in Montreal, etc., who are digging what I do, some folks in the States. And I'm blessed by that, man. I love to be able to connect with an audience. Now, the trick is this. I have a vision of the kind of person I want to be. And it's influenced partly by God, but also something inward, something innate, something that, like a worldview I've had for as long as I've been able to think abstractly about the world, you know what I mean? Which is that I want to be a virtuous man. I want to be a man who lives a good life. And I want to be someone who sacrifices himself when necessary in pursuit either of betterment of self or of, in particular, of the well-being of other people. And I haven't really learned how to do that yet, you know what I mean? I haven't sacrificed very much. I haven't laid my life on the line. I haven't worked like a dog as yet, really, to be a benefit to others. And there's a part of me that's conflicted because performance and showmanship, there's obviously good in that, right? You're making folks happy. And with some of the songs I've written, I had the great good fortune the other week. I wrote a song called Company Policy. Company policy is a concept I came up with because I fell in love with a girl in, I want to say, mid-2010. And this girl, I mean, shit, you know, I still smile to think of her. She's a gem. She's an extraordinary human being. And we had a romance of the kind I'd always dreamed of. I've been a romantic since I was yay high. I've been like, you know, I wanted to find a girl and just love the shit out of her and give her the things she needed and make her like extraordinarily happy. And I had the chance to do that. It was a brief romance. It didn't last very long, but we made one another really happy. And then she left. And, you know, it rends your heart in half. But but it's interesting. There's a Bill Withers song called Liza. It's one of the songs that I listen to regularly. And he's sitting down, and you picture him sitting down, and the first thing he says into the microphone in this song, he says, probably one of the nicest affections that there is in the whole world is that's there between a wise old uncle and a very innocent young niece. And then he goes, Liza, won't you lay your head on my shoulder? Cry if you want to, I don't mind. Seems to me you need some love and kindness, and all I've got is time. Wiser is the way when you grow older. Cry if you want to, I don't mind. Seems to me you need to give and show love. Oh. So lay your head on mine. He says, I think I might have missed the key line. The key line is, nothing heals a broken heart but time. And it's miraculous that that's worked. But I came up with this concept, company policy, you know, and company policy because while I was in this relationship with this girl, she used to turn to me and she used to ask me, why are you so sweet to me? I've never encountered anyone who was so sweet to me, who was so consistently considerate of my feelings. And this is a difficult thing to say because I want to be a righteous man. I don't want to be immodest. I want to represent myself truly and accurately, and I don't want to toot my own horn unnecessarily, you know what I'm talking about. But she did say this to me, and I would respond to her, well, it's company policy. It's what I do. It's how I am. It's the way I want to be. I want to give you the best love I can. And so company policy, when she left me, I wrote this song, Company Policy. It goes, oh, don't you know, it's the chorus. It's company policy, baby. It's company policy, baby. Just the way I've learned to love. It's company policy, baby. It's the way I make my peace. It's in my soul. And I wrote a song about forgiving her. I wrote a song about forgiveness. I wrote a song about the fact that she had chosen in conscience, to leave me because she felt the need to. She had, agency is so crucially important. And so because she had exercised her agency and been true to herself, I had forgiven her and I still loved her. And, the trick with company policy, which I've sort of said this in live shows and the like, is that in love and in romance, but also in general in human relationships, I try to love people on their terms. This is the way I've put it historically in live shows. I don't want to come off sounding rehearsed, but I've said it. I've said company policy means to love a person on their terms rather than the terms that would best benefit me. And to love when it hurts, and, to love for the love of a human being, irrespective of whether or not you get what you want out of a relationship. That's the way I've put it live before. And that's sort of crucially important to me. And so I wrote a song about that. I wrote a song about, got a lot of my dogs thinking I'm strange. This girl left you. Why you got a song singing her praise? Why you ain't livid with rage cussing her out? I tell them, because that ain't actually what loving's about. Sometimes I want to attack and be savagely cruel, but my heart doesn't have the capacity to. And you did what yours asked you to do. So how I'm finna be mad because we can't rekindle the thing that we had? And I went on like this, sort of just in praise of her and in sort of making reference to how transcendent it had been for me, how wonderful it had been for me to experience love for the first time. I can spit the whole thing if you'd like me to. I'll do it. I'm a rapper. I'll do it. I'll rap my song. You know what I'm saying?
The connection between rap and your faith and spirituality.
Sure. Well, it's tricky. It's tricky because I've become a Baha'i. Here's the story of how I became a Baha'i. My father and, Allah Shalom, my mother, were very observant Reconstructionist Jews. Reconstructionist Judaism is a philosophy which sort of interprets Judaism as a civilization, as sort of an ever-evolving civilization, and regards sees the central duty of Jews to be the carrying forward of Judaism as a civilization rather than as a faith. And I was brought up to sort of understand God as this power that allows us to rise above our brute animal natures and do good things in the world, but not necessarily as a supernatural force or a being with a mind and a personality. And I still respect Reconstructionism hugely. I think it's a wonderful philosophy. I think Mordecai Kaplan, who created it, was tremendously brilliant, and that its principles can do a whole lot of good to help the world. But there was something in me that was sort of asking, okay, well, I read the sermon of one of the talks of Sojourner Truth, and she was talking about, ain't I a woman? Talking about how dainty white women would receive more respect than she as a hardworking black woman ever did in those days. And I've sort of been thinking, I'm not to relate the scenario by any stretch of the imagination, but there's the turn of phrase. I was thinking, ain't I a human being? Who's Jesus? What did Jesus do in the world? What are Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, Zoroastrianism, Jainism? What have these faiths, philosophies, worldviews, understandings of reality brought to the world? Is there a common unifying thread? What if God's out there? What if there is a being, And I was listening to a lot of gospel. I was listening to Curtis Mayfield. I was listening to People Get Ready. I was listening to the Muslim albino rapper Brother Ali, who's tremendously gifted and has written. He writes very vividly and very movingly about his faith. And Mos Def and Kanye West and some of the Scarface. Scarface has a tremendously moving song called Someday, and another called What Can I Do, about his faith. And I was listening to these songs and thinking, well, what's this like? What would it mean to sort of develop the relationship to the infinite that these people have, where it's not just sort of a tacit acceptance that we are all united as part of a whole, and we have a sort of responsibility in the interdependent web of existence, to use a Unitarian turn of phrase. But what if there is a personal God out there to whom we can relate, supplicate, call out, and who loves us? What would this mean? And when I found the Baha'i faith, I was sort of astonished. My father was the last in his family who had never been to Israel. And so we went as Jewish pilgrims when I was 15, and I saw the gardens in Haifa, to which Baha'u'llah had been banished when Haifa and Akka were prison colonies for, those the Ottoman and Persian empires detested, because Baha'u'llah had claimed to be a new prophet after Muhammad alayhi salam, and the ruling authorities didn't like that. They banished him there, and that's why the Baha'i Gardens and the seat of its administrative order are in Haifa and Accra. And I was sort of astonished. I thought, wow, what is this? What's this wonderful thing? And I thought back to Sam Cooke. There's a time I thought I wouldn't last for long. Now I know I'ma be able to carry on. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Whoa, yes it will. So, follow me for a second here. Like, Baha'u'llah claims to be the fulfillment of the eschatological expectations of previous faiths. And the understanding of the Baha'i faith is that the religions we know of are differing versions of the same truth, revealed at different times with slightly different secondary characteristics according to the needs of the people of a given age. Such that, at least according to some Baha'i understandings and my understanding, the polytheism of early Hinduism is not necessarily a blasphemy as such. It's part of the ongoing, development of religious civilization and of sort of a beginner's ontology. You know what I mean? And see also what looks like irreligious visions of Buddhism, non-theistic visions of Buddhism, and Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Zoroastrianism, Sikhism, all have their part to play in this sort of interconnected matrix, whereby the one God reveals his truth in different forms. Baha'u'llah says we reveal our writings in 9 different modes according to the capacities of different hearers and listeners. And I was sort of inspired by this because I had always sort of dreamed that if there was a God out there, then of necessity, he could not answer my prayers as a Jew, but reject the prayers of my brethren who were Hindu or Christian or Jain or what have you, that there must be a universally benevolent and omnibenevolent God. I've never quite been able to make the leap that Baha'is usually make, which is the traditional understanding that God is omnipotent and has full sovereignty over the workings of the universe. But I do believe in God's omnibenevolence. And this is sort of a glorious picture that I've always loved of an omnibenevolent God's intelligent and sophisticated plan for the universe, culminating at present in Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha, but not necessarily. But the Baha'i understanding is the prophetic cycle will continue, and that there will never be a last messenger of God, that God will continue to send prophets to guide humanity according to our needs. And this was sort of revolutionary to me because it had always made sense to me, and in particular, it accorded with an experience I once had at the tail end of high school when it was first discovered that I had bipolar disorder and I was having delusions. I had delusions that there was a God and that he would counsel believers of every stripe, as well as irreligious folk, to take counsel in and to read and to consider, sacred and authoritative the scriptures of all religions, such that, we were supposed to be reading the Tripitaka, we were supposed to be reading the Bhagavad Gita, the Bible, the Quran, the Torah, the Talmud, etc. And I'd always wondered about that because it was, I didn't at the time consider it to have been a vision from God because it sounded too much like what I wanted. It sounded too much like something that I would like to have been true, and so I sort of assumed it couldn't be. But here was Baha'u'llah proclaiming that essentially it was, and that Sam Cooke's change, John Lennon's change, was at hand. That it was possible to reconcile the children of men and build heaven on earth, and being a universalist who believes forthrightly and devoutly in, the sacredness of human beings and the capacity of every human being on the level of the soul to develop wonderful qualities and to be wonderful, to become wonderful, this sort of appealed to me because Baha'u'llah says, look, it's possible and we can win this. This benighted dunya, this fallen world, is not necessarily the world in which we will always be. We can build a society which universalizes an understanding of the golden rule and of universal brotherhood and love, compassion.
How did you first learn about Baha'i? Who was the person that introduced you?
It's called the Baha'i Faith, and I heard of it first because my dear friend John Cade, one of the true greats I've ever known, was my teacher of world religions, and I think he taught me history instead, but he kept a golden rule poster which was designed by a Baha'i on his door in high school, and it had a quote from the Baha'i Faith on it. That's how I found out what the Baha'i Faith was. Then I went to Israel and saw this, and I thought, oh wow, these are these Baha'i people. Oh my God, wow! And then I went home and researched it on Wikipedia endlessly. In fact, it took me 6 years from having discovered the Baha'i Faith until I enrolled. I enrolled at the age of 21, and I discovered it at the age of 15. So it's sort of been an ongoing process. And in fact, in all frankness, there are still elements of the Baha'i Faith, laws and minor injunctions, which are out of accord with my conscience and which are out of accord with what I understand about godliness. For example, if I'm going to be real, the approach to homosexuality, which is understood as normative in the Baha'i community, even though we don't have statements from Baha'u'llah or Abdul Baha upon it, we have the statements of Shoghi Effendi, to whom authority was passed later. Gay Baha'is and their allies have struggled for a long time to normalize the idea that gay Baha'is should have the same rights as straight Baha'i couples. Traditionally in Baha'i circles, there's a discrepancy there. There's traditionally, it's sort of, the homosexuality has sort of been frowned upon because of Shoghi Effendi's injunctions to that effect. But I think it's fundamentally out of accord with the Baha'i spirit and with the spirit of God. And so I work online every so often with Baha'i activists who are gay or who are allies and who, haven't reconciled themselves to the fact that this is the way it has to be. And they maintain their Baha'i identities as best they can. And I love these people and I fellowship with them. And I think they're representative of the true spirit of God. Even though I think it's indisputable that among normative, quote-unquote Orthodox Baha'is, although they're among the Baha'is who follow the Universal House of Justice, the main Baha'i group, the great majority of those people are also following in God's way. It's just a different understanding that I wish could be corrected someday and that I'm going to sort of continue to work with. And I get pulled in multiple different directions, I sometimes wonder, well, look, if you have this disagreement in conscience with the normative understanding of the Baha'i faith, why are you still a Baha'i? If you participate in, nonviolent political activism and you believe in the right of civil disobedience, as Dr. King does, why do you maintain a relationship with the Baha'i faith, which traditionally has sought to better the conditions of the world through avenues not involving civil disobedience, and has counseled its followers against civil disobedience for reasons related to Baha'i attitudes on politics and partisanship? Because the Baha'i faith has an administrative order, and I come from a lay-led religion. Reconstructionist Judaism is very lay-led and not particularly hierarchical. Why have you affiliated yourself with a religion that has a hierarchical structure? And the long and the short of it is that my soul has a sort of puppy-like enthusiasm for anything involving the Baha'i faith and runs around in circles for joy every time I'm in the Baha'i Center, for example. And not to mention Abdul Baha, the son of Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, who lived an exemplary life, and, the hem of whose garment I've kissed in photographs. And, because I love him so much, I don't want to let him down. And he deserves the best I can give him, the way my friends do. And so I haven't turned my back yet. I can't.
Take me back to the time where you first were inspired by the faith.
Well, when I got home from Israel, I phoned some local Baha'is. One of them gave me a book called The Hidden Words, which is understood to be a book which the Muslim Mahdi had the responsibility to reveal, according to Shia Islam, out of which the Baha'i faith grew. So Baha'u'llah, having claimed that he was the Mahdi, revealed the hidden book of Fatima, and it's called Kalimat al-Maknuneh, the hidden words. And in it he says, he assumes the voice of God, although he was a prophet in manifestation. He wasn't God himself, but he assumes the voice of God and says, "Thou art my robe, and my robe can never be outworn. Thinkest thyself only a puny form when the universe is folded up within thee?" And he says any number of other things, speaking directly to humankind about their obligations before God. He says, "Love me that I may love thee. If thou lovest me not, my love can in no wise reach thee." And he says, "O son of man, if thou lovest me, turn away from thyself. If thou seekest my pleasure, regard not thine own, that thou mayest die in me, and I may eternally live in thee." And that's sort of accorded fundamentally with what I understood about sacrifice as an engine of human growth, and with the dream of the potential realization of human capacity for boundless giving and love. It accords with company policy fundamentally. And so I didn't want to turn my back, and I've never wanted to turn my back even when I felt compelled to. There was upon the centenary of the passing of Baha'u'llah, which was in 1992, because of the history of the Baha'i faith begins with the declaration of a forerunner figure called the Bab in 1844, and promising the advent of a manifestation called "He whom God shall make manifest," the Mahdi, the fulfillment of the eschatological expectations of previous faiths. The return of Christ, the Kalki avatar of Hindus, the fifth awakened Buddha, the Lord of Hosts come with 10,000 saints, etc. The Bab was a youth who revealed prophetic writings of his own, but also prophesied the advent of this figure, and Baha'u'llah claimed in 1853 to be this figure. I think he arrived in a garden in exile in 1853, made his declaration, and wasn't really fully known to have been who he was until 1863. But the Baha'i calendar dates from 1844, so this is the development in the latter half of the 19th century. And he passed in 1892 in exile. And in 1992, the centenary of his birth was acknowledged, and the country singer Dan Seals, who had been part of the soft rock duo Seals and Crofts in the 70s, who had that hit, "Summer Breeze Makes Me Feel Fine," they became Baha'is in the 1970s, and Dan Seals was called forth in 1992 to write this song in honor of Baha'u'llah's passing, and he wrote a song called "Garden of Rezvan," which I found on YouTube. And "Garden of Rezvan" I can sing for you also. He says, "Gather now at the mystic hour in the Garden of Rezvan, circling round his blessed tent in the Garden of Rezvan. and the nightingales sing, and the souls are on fire as the crimson-colored ark set sail in the presence of the best beloved of the world. In the garden of Resvan, the fragrance of the rose is strong. In the garden of Resvan, the friends are silent, struck with awe in the garden of Resvan, as the Ancient of Days lifts the myriad veils of light, and the new creation sings with joy in the presence of the best beloved of the world. In the garden of Resvan, the Lord of Names ascends his throne in the garden of Resvan. Approach him now and quaff your fill in the garden of Resvan. Everlasting life from the hands of his grave bestowed upon all humankind in the presence of the beloved of the world in the garden of Resvan. Now, the garden of Resvan was the garden at which Baha'u'llah found himself in exile, and it means paradise. And the garden of Resvan is sort of, in this case, a metaphor for heaven, for what Baha'is call the Abha kingdom. And everlasting life from the hands of his grace bestowed upon all humankind. All humankind. Think for a second about what a powerful vision that is. I mean, I've always had this image. I've had this image in my head since I was 15. So now for going on 11 years, for 10 years, of people of all sorts and flavors, stripes, colors, religions, sexes and gender identities and orientations assembled around the tent from which comes this glorious light, this all-pervading light. And that's God's light, that God is real and that he will look after us, all of us, indiscriminately, showering his love upon us. Like Abdu'l-Baha says, make thou this garden to flower, and from the deep pools of thine abounding grace keep it ever green and lustrous, ever fresh and shimmering and fair, referring to the garden of all humankind. And I've envisioned everyone over time, white folks and black folks, Buddhist monks and turbaned Sikhs, Sardars and Muslims and Zoroastrians and, queer folks and my mother and aunt and Bubby and Zaidi, circling the blessed tent, happy, content, well, looked after by God. I've had that vision in my head all this time, and I've never been able to forget it. I've never wanted to forget it. I've clung to it like the hem of God's garment, like Abdu'l-Baha's robe, which I've risen to kiss when I've seen his photograph. I went to the Baha'i Center a couple months ago. I do it every so often. I have a dialogue, sort of, a Socratic dialogue with Mariam, who is the Mariam Tumrai is the one of the employees of the Baha'i Center. And I go to her and I say, Mariam, I gotta get out. She says, no, you don't. Why do you have to get out? And we talk about whatever the issue is, be it the issue surrounding homosexuality, the issue surrounding the authoritarian nature and structure of the Baha'i faith, disagreements I've had with the Universal House of Justice, the fact that women aren't formally allowed to be elected to the Universal House of Justice, even though the record of the Baha'i faith on issues of equality is otherwise exemplary. Any number of minor issues. Sometimes it's just like, Mariam, I don't want to have to be buried in whatever country I die in. I want to be able to be exported to Toronto I want my ashes to be put there. But the Kitab Aqdas, a sacred book of the Baha'i faith, says you have to be buried wherever you die. Well, I can't do this. I can't do it anymore. And it's sort of I hesitate to bring his name up in a positive context given, recent revelations, but it's sort of Woody Allenish, the sort of neurosis. And it's sort of darkly comic for me, even as my soul was in utter anguish. And Mariam and I will go back and forth, or sometimes it'll be Liz Chappell or whoever it is at the Baha'i Center, and I'll, be dialoguing with them, and then I'll say, fuck it. I'm not supposed to cuss in the Baha'i Center, of course. But I'll say, fuck it. I'll just go off and pray, or I'll go off and, to the devotional at Jamal Neufeld's place in Flemington Park, which is, the Sunday night devotional I go to every week, which is just a magical place. Or I'll, I joined the Baha'i choir, and then I tried to found a social justice committee among the Baha'is, and this and that and that and this. I'm striving to serve and striving to reconcile the difficulties I have with my faith, and I want to serve Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha as they deserve to be served. They're miraculous, they're amazing men, and they're men who I have to believe, or at least I've tried to believe, have this spark born of God, which God gave them of his sovereign will to teach humankind how to be okay in this world.
What was it that actually sparked? You came home, you looked online,
Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha, man, the hidden words in the Paris talks. I came home and I read Baha'u'llah's hidden words in Abdul Baha's Paris talks. I've got this book right here, an edition of which was one of the first Baha'i books I ever owned. And it's got selection 210 in here. It's just my favorite thing in the world that there ever was. He says, oh, ye roses in the garden of the love of God. I'll paraphrase. Oh, ye roses in the garden of the love of God, you are but the reaping of love's sacred harvest. So remember the beloved in your hearts, and let him hear in your weeping the tears of a martyr. And when you love, let it be amazing love. Let the soul of the world be revived by your loving. And when all the world is cold, despoiled, and harsh, surge ye forward and seek ye God. Ho, ye roses, ye royal falcons, on the wrist of God. In his castles, his banners, his flag steady flying. Turn to calm the lamentations of the lost, and give ye life to the souls when the embers are dying. And when you love, let it be world-embracing love. Every person, all nations, take joy in their being for being. And when all has been encircled by the dark, gird your souls and let them shine with love. Oh, ye roses, oh, ye roses. Now, this is an adaptation. This is something I wrote that paraphrases what Abdul Baha says here. But he talks endlessly about the boundless love the Baha'is are to exhort to humankind. He says, be a source of consolation to every sad person. And let your heart burn with loving kindness for all who may cross your path. He was this extraordinary figure. He said, whoever asserts the will to love amidst the darkness of human ignorance, that this is the way to live. This is the way to live an extraordinary life, to be quickened of God, to be a Baha'i. And he bore it out in his life in the early part of the 20th century. And he was forever abashed before even the lowliest of his fellow men. He spoke out strongly against racism of white against black, and he, fed the poor and sacrificed himself relentlessly during World War I to provide for the needs of the poor and indigent in the Holy Land. And by your fruits you shall know them, right? Abdul Baha was the son of Baha'u'llah. these two men, counseled a spirit of friendliness and fellowship between all religions and all races, and called for the upraising of the standard of universal brotherhood. These were the glad tidings they were ushered in, and I was astonished. I remember I used to picture myself in. I remember being in pajamas with my toothbrush, and this is 15-year-old Noah just standing awestruck at the idea that Sam Cooke's change was actually coming, that this was God's promise fulfilled. And as a Reconstructionist, we're not necessarily required to have a supernatural view of God. There isn't necessarily an assumption made one way or the other about whether God exists, as long as you keep alive Jewish civilization and Jewish tradition. And so I sort of, being that I had wondered, listening to Curtis Mayfield, listening to Brother Ali, whether God was real, this was a concept saying that not only was God real, but that he was as loving as we had always hoped, that his heart was the purest of all hearts, and that he had an intelligent and thoughtful and complex and workable, at least ideally workable, plan for how humankind was going to be okay, after all, was going to be able to save itself, and that we would all eventually realize the dream of universal brotherhood.
And when did you decide to become a Baha'i? What happened?
I remember that night. Shahram and Alexandra Arjamand were friends of mine, mother and son, who were on the local spiritual assembly of the Baha'is, and I called them into a meeting and said, I didn't say, I'm ready to do this, let's do this. I said, I have to do this. I remember being less than entirely happy that night because I had already studied and learned about, the prohibition on equality of rights and dignity for gay Baha'is, at least when it comes to marriage. And I had never accepted it, and I'll never accept it. I don't think it's right. I don't think it's of God that this injunction is taken seriously by Baha'is. And there are numerous other small issues as well, but I had to do it. My soul was longing to call, to rush headlong into the community of the greatest name, My friend Ian and I have a joke among ourselves that if we ever make an album together, he's a folk artist and I'm a rapper, we'll call it The Learned Grammarian and the Mystic Noah, as sort of a pun on our names, because there's a parable in the Baha'i writings about the learned grammarian who stands forever at the foot of the water's edge, nitpicking about various complex dubieties, is Abdul Baha's phrase, and not, throwing himself headlong into the water, and the mystic knower who just dives in to the ocean of the love of God. And that night, the mystic knower side overwhelmed the learned grammarian side, and the learned grammarian side's been putting up a fight ever since. But I'm here. You see me. I'm sitting here. I got my, gay Baha'i support group, and I'll never give up on them. I'll never, reconcile myself to that fact, to the idea that injunction is holy, because I don't think it is. I think something went wrong in the machinery some way down the line. But I still love Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha with everything, and I can't give up. And
do you remember the moment? And what happens when you become a Baha'i? You make a declaration at a devotional, or how does it work?
You let the local spiritual assembly know, and they mail you a paper and an ID card. You sign something, and it's not. You can make a declaration at a devotional. I've known people who've done that, but it's not particularly complex. It's as simple as the Islamic Shahada. You make the local Baha'i community, make it known to the local Baha'i community that you're a Baha'i, and then they send you a card, and you come to the 19-day Baha'i feast. Fuck it. It's relatively simple.
One of the questions I ask is, what was the first time in your life you had to rely upon God, or you chose to rely upon God?
I don't know. Because there is, as the same as there's a part of my brain that's been colonized by Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha, there's also a part that's been colonized by John Stuart Mill and by Mordecai Kaplan, who encouraged me to be skeptical. So my reliance upon God always feels adulterated. In Barack Obama's phrase, he sort of talked about being in debate with a conservative black Christian activist named Alan Keyes, who made him feel like he was less than a true Christian for, supporting gay rights and abortion. And he said, I don't want to feel like my faith is adulterated. And I know that my own faith is adulterated because, my reliance upon God as understood, when understood as, acceptance of the covenant of leadership succession is less than thorough, less than real. But I try to rely upon God every day. I try to trust in God every day. I try to trust in the ultimate order of things. I try to trust that God's compassion will out, that God's mercy is going to win this thing. Because look at the fucking world. I realize I shouldn't cuss as a Baha'i, but look at the fucking world. Look at Syria, Zimbabwe, North Korea, Iran. Look at capitalism and communism both. The manifold injustices. Just, you know what it is about belief in God? In some ways, I guess it's a kind of glorified belief in magic. Because if there's no empirical evidence and the irreligious folk are right, the non-theist and the anti-theist, etc., who knows what it's all for? But because I believe in the inchoate and eternal light at the end of the tunnel, that if God exists, if an omnibenevolent, never mind omnipotence, but if an omnibenevolent God exists, then in Dr. King's phrase, the moral arc of the universe may be long, but it bends towards justice. If God is real, then under the surface of everything, all the everything, is not entropy and not cruelty, but light. Is wonderment, is joy. And this wonderment, this joy, has been in me for as long as I've been alive. This sort of, and I try not to, I don't want to boast of it, but I love people. I love human beings, and I love the great majority of the human beings I've known, particularly my friends. I could rant all day about any number of individual friends of mine, and the person my mother was, the person my aunt was. They understood love. They had the same spark in them. That spark, I think, is born of God. Is born of an omnibenevolent God who's got us in the end. And, I wasn't sure I wanted to turn 26. So my birthday is the 16th of March. On the 14th, I deliberately overdosed on my bipolar medication. I wanted to hurt myself. I wasn't confident that the love I have the capacity to give and bring into the world, which is real and which I admit, was enough because I hadn't worked hard enough. I hadn't sacrificed. I hadn't done enough to help children, to help the elderly, to help people genuinely in need. I was still too selfish. I was still, failing on any number of levels and in any number of ways. And I wasn't sure that it was enough. I didn't know if it could ever be enough, that I had ever been enough or could ever be enough. And so I, threw myself into the hospital. When I realized that things were going really wrong, I took a cab. I guess taking that cab to the hospital and getting them to give me, they gave me charcoal and they made me drink charcoal and they flushed the poison out of my system and stuck an IV in me and did a bunch of blood work and all the rest of it for 3 days. I was getting all these warm and affectionate messages about my birthday and people didn't know I was in the hospital. I guess throwing myself in that cab was a form of reliance upon God. I guess. I hope. I don't know. I have no way of knowing. We have no way of knowing. If I'm not relying upon God, then why would I bother to be religious when that same God took my mother from me? There's a man. Do you know there's a man at my father's Reconstructionist congregation? Lovely man, wonderful man, but he was higher up on the liver transplant list, so he has a liver and my mother doesn't. And I love the guy. If I saw him, I'd hug him. But how long can I be in a room with the guy? Yet why do I pray? Why do I pray? Why would I pray when my mother's gone? Well, first of all, who can blame him for taking her? She was the best of the best. He wanted one of his angels back. But still, never mind my mother. Think of all the other mothers who haven't deserved to suffer as they've suffered. But, all the excruciating pain that good people are in all the time, every day. My own mother didn't herself believe in God because she had to be at the hospital for blood transfusions so regularly, and she would see children suffer in a hospital. She didn't believe. My aunt didn't believe because my mother had been taken from her, and then my aunt passed herself. You know, so reliance upon God is just bothering, just trying, and it's not uncommon for prayer to reduce me to tears. It's not uncommon that when I'm in a devotional setting, singing my heart out to God with Jamal and Veronica and Jenna and Dina and Alberto and Lal and the rest of them, that I'll just, weep or experience exultant joy. It's because I'm trying so hard to trust in God at those moments. I have this little handwritten prayer book. And every time one of my handwritten prayer books, every time I lose or misplace or disfigure or what have you, one of these handwritten prayer books, I go out and buy another fucking prayer book. I go out and buy another fucking little sketchbook or what have you, little moleskin, and I keep, and I this same, I wrote that it was a blue book when it's a white book, but that's because usually they're blue books. I write the same introduction, the same little, this is Noah's little book of prayers and songs and things consecrated to the glory of the all highest beloved. I have this little childlike wonder that overtakes me when I endeavor to write one of these things, and then I write my favorite prayers of all different, faith traditions and what have you. They all go in here, one after the other, all the prayers I've always loved. The prayers of Hazrat Inayat Khan, the Sufi master, Christian and Jewish and Muslim and Sikh and Hindu and Zoroastrian and Buddhist and Jain. Stuff goes in here. Just random, maybe some Bill Withers lyrics or Curtis Mayfield lyrics or Mountain Goats lyrics. Or, whatever will go in here. And this is my little, and then of course the words of Baha'u'llah Abdul-Baha. They'll go in this little book. And every time I lose one of them, I'll just get the other one. I'll just get another,
Is there a prayer rap that you've written?
Not yet. That requires more work than I've yet done. But I did write a verse at the Baha'i Youth Conference I was at a couple months ago for the Baha'i Youth Conference that I didn't end up getting to perform, that I repurposed on my new album for a song that's getting a music video shortly called Stay Up. When you think about your place in the universe, I don't know about y'all, sometimes I'm confused at first, but then I've thought about it for a while. All of a sudden, in a fluid burst, I feel like the truth emerged. Some days you regret you're alive, but look around, there's no end to the blessing you find. I learned the only way that you can truly gain is when you see a person hurting and you soothe their pain. And all the religions and the creeds are true. If you don't believe in God, He believes in you. So even when you fear that you don't know best, you are loved by a love that knows no death. And when you share it with the other people you know, your chains disintegrate and you're free to grow. Life will always have laughter and music and radiant love. All you gotta do is stay up, because everybody falls down sometime. Don't you be afraid of the sunshine. Yes, you can and will get on your feet, whoa. And when the pain is unbearable, that's what the music is there for. Lift your voice and sing it, move them feet. And stay up, and stay up, and stay up, stay up, and stay up, stay up, stay up, stay up, and stay up, stay up, stay up. So, I wrote bits and pieces of that verse, had references to the more specific references to the Baha'i faith in them originally, but I repurposed it and it's going on my album. And I, when the time comes, I'll consecrate something to Baha'u'llah and Abdul-Baha, but that's going to be tricky because I like my cussing. I say motherfucker a lot in my rhymes. And maybe I smoke weed now and again. Maybe that's true as well, all right, And I want to, but I have to work up to clarity of purpose before I write something for Baha'u'llah and Abdul-Baha. I have to get there. I'm working on a devotional album. In fact, that's true. I'm working on a devotional album with my man, Nosratallahu Ibn Dawood Ferguson, one of my dearest brothers. My friends Ian Nabil and Nosrat Ferguson are some of my closest Baha'i friends, and Crystal Ann Ferguson, Nosrat's wife. The three of them are everything to me, you understand? They're my everything. I love these people. And so Nosrat's got his little studio, and we're working on something. I got a song called Jesus Is Back. I got a song called Wonderful Thing. I'm working on these joints that sort of have a little bit more of a Baha'i flavor to them. You know, I had been lost, alone and afraid about this whole world, so filled up with hate. The people do nothing but struggle and fight, always so given to cruelty and spite. But rather than sink, into despair, I went to my fashioner, said me a prayer. He said, don't be afraid, for soon it will be that every last soul is united in me. And God said His grace weren't for only some. God said His love was for everyone. And God said He would free us all. And it's a wonderful thing for my heart to know. Now I had a friend who'd been stricken with woe. So I went to my king and I knelt me down low. Said I won't make my prayer, no, until you answer hers. Answer it better and answer it first. Well, she's from a different religion than I. So some try to tell me she's fit for the fire. But God only said, I will heal all her pain. I'm going to make sure she smiles again. Now see, cuz God said, wouldn't just me or you get saved. God said, it'd be the whole of the human race. And God said, He would free us all. And it's a wonderful thing for my heart to know. Now, because I've had this vision for so long of interfaith harmony, this was a song I wrote about it to sing at devotionals. And I performed it at Rezvan, the holiest Baha'i holiday. Recently, I had that honor. And this is the song I wrote. I have one called Jesus Is Back. I have several others, adapting Baha'i writings, adapting Sufi writings for this purpose, you know. And I'm blessed. I'm blessed like anything. I'm blessed like hell. I got friends among the community of the followers of Hazrat Inayat Khan, the Universal Sufi Order, the Quakers, Unitarians, liberal Christians, liberal Jews, liberal Muslims, you know, Hindus and Buddhists and Jains and Sikhs, all sorts of folks, man. I'm blessed, man. And I just try to incorporate the best of what's in all of those traditions to write beautiful interfaith spiritual songs. I want to write interfaith gospel, you know what I'm saying? Because Jews don't do a lot of gospel. There's my man Joshua Nelson, but Jews don't do a lot of gospel historically. And Baha'is have done a little bit of gospel here and there, but you know, I want to, you know, they got a community in Atlanta called the Baha'i Unity Center. They got their gospel choir. That's where I'm trying to get to with the singing like that. You know, I want like the Otis Redding. I want Baha'i Otis Redding music. You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm trying to. So I have to write it. You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm doing. And as far as hip hop, how does it connect with hip hop? How does it connect with my rap? Like, okay, I cuss a little bit. Okay, I talk about politics a little bit, and I get mad at like the persecution of the Baha'is in Iran, and I get mad at the Israel-Palestine conflict, you know, angry at both sides in my music. And I'm not, you know, I'm upfront about that. I got to be real. I get mad at Islamic extremism, man. What they, you know, what they believe is their jihad, and they, you know, persecute and mistreat Pakistani Christians and Thai, you know, southern Buddhists in southern Thailand and Christians in Nigeria and all this shit. It's bullshit. It's, you know, this is a false doctrine and an abomination before God that they call this Islam. And so I speak on it in my music. You know, I don't think it's right. But so sometimes I do some things that Baha'is would find controversial because Baha'is are about peace and love and unity. But, and of course I'm vocal about support for LGBTQ equality all through my music too. I mean, I ain't trying to, you know, sugarcoat that. But I try to bring it home. You know, I want there to be that universal spirit, and I like making it known that when I'm rapping, there's a lot of joy in it, because a lot of rap is stone faced. A lot of the greatest rap is stone faced, but a lot of rap is stone faced. My favorite hip hop, like, even if they're coming from gutter situations, even if they're coming from nothing, you know, black folk in low income environments, some of them have been dealing drugs to get by, you know what I'm saying? And they're talking about that in their music. The Scarfaces, who speak with the sort of quiet authority and the sort of smoke burnished voice where he sounds like a preacher who's done everything and been everywhere. Scarface has that sort of quiet gravitas, and then Ghostface is hyped up and yelling at you. Ghostface is yelling at you, but he's like got all this detail and narrative, you know, in his rhymes, and all this evocative stuff, all this, you know, imagery. Most Def coming down with a booming voice of righteousness. Speak is my hammer, bang the earth in its shape, now let it fall. Like, a lot of these great artists have done this shit. Brother Ali with his spirituality, and his frank talk about his genuine and emotive connection to Islam, and, you know, everybody all across the spectrum, man, from Queen Latifah to Aesop Rock to Bubba Sparks to the Dungeon Family. Whoo! The Dungeon Family, Outkast are the kings of this, man, because they put so much emotion per song into what they do. And A Tribe Called Quest and De La Soul and on. And everybody everywhere from, you know, forget about it. Goody Mom, Killer Mike. Killer Mike's a good one, because Killer Mike is this dude from the streets of Atlanta who's booming with the authority of a preacher. And his song, he's got a pair of songs called God in the Building, 1 and 2, where he just, you know, gives this street person's take on, you know, the malfeasance of political elites and their mistreatment of black folks in the ghetto. And he just goes at it, man, and speaks, you know, at once he's a man from the hood and he's been saved by Christ. And so I love that contrast, man. I love that I guess, what would you call it? A dichotomy or a dialectic? Who was the philosopher who came up with the dialectic? Was it Hegel? Hegelian dialectic? I don't know. I could be speaking out of my ass right now. But, you know, I like that contrast, because it's real and it's reflective of the genuine experience of these good people dealing with adverse circumstances, who are spitting the truth about their situation and doing it artfully. And that's why I had to join that legacy. And I try to put a little bit of that God, that Lord fire in it. You know what I'm saying? Theory has it the Christian rapper calls what he does Lord fire, because you got to have that spirit that's born of God, that dream of righteousness streaming down like, you know, like waters, like that, because wrapped up in hip hop is the spirit of Dr. King and the spirit of Brother Malcolm, you know? That's where it comes from. It comes from the narrative of the history of the Black American experience, and you know, the historical memory of suffering and the promise of deliverance. In many ways, hip hop is replete with very direct and sincere expressions of faith, and I love being able to be part of that legacy, trying to humbly, as a white artist, just from a privileged background, just coming in and speaking the truth according to my understanding, and doing so in rhyme form, and paying tribute to the greats, paying tribute to the Nas's and the Wu-Tangs and the Scarfaces, man, and the Outcasts. I love to do it. I'm honored to do it. Are you kidding? The fact that Kool Herc and Africa Bambaataa, the founders of hip hop, let me in here to do this, what an honor, man.
Tell me about a time you doubted your faith, or you struggled with your faith.
Semi-regular. You know, I have these debates with the employees at the Baha'i Center all the time. You know, already by doubting God's omnipotence, that's a kind of blasphemy, I suppose, you know, because how can an omnipotent God allow this level of suffering if there isn't also Satan? And, you know, both Jews and Baha'is are sort of agnostic and indifferent on the question of Satan. Abdul Baha claims that Satan is the insistent self, which is a wise insight, but I sort of some part of me hopes that if God exists, so does Satan, because that would explain the prevalence of some suffering. When I was a child, I had this fantastical vision. I had this vision that I had a polytheistic vision that there were two gods, a husband and wife, and she was warm and loving and sweet-natured, and he was sort of grumpy and hard-headed. They were both ultimately very kind, but, they sort of had spats as husbands and wives will, and they made love and made us. But that he would, he had created the sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? The adamantine certainties that abound in the Abrahamic faiths, of Temple Judaism and Roman Catholic Christianity and Sunni Islam and what have you, sort of, you must do things this way. That tradition. I don't want to besmirch these religions, but that's part of their legacy. And then that the sweet-natured mother goddess had created, liberal visions of these religions, had created Buddhism and Hinduism and Sikhism, and would sort of tinker with Judaism and Christianity and Islam, so that when you had Sufism, that was her tinkering with his business. And when you had crazy fundamentalist Hindus mistreating Muslims in India, that was his tinkering with her business. And but that ultimately they loved each other, and that's why they didn't kill each other, and that's why the world wouldn't be either perfect heaven or perfect hell, because ultimately they would reconcile and get by with each other like couples do. At my worst moments, I sort of wonder whether God isn't that sort of grumpy asshole. God who, I have a friend, and I didn't write that verse and wonderful thing about her, but I might as well have. Her name is Rachel Napal, and she's a Baha'i in the community of, I believe, a Trinidadian Hindu background. And she is just, when you love somebody and you got to talk about them and you got to express the love and the joy that you have because they're the most wonderful and amazing. So, of course, okay, you know what? Rachel Napal is very wonderful and amazing. She's very sweet-natured, this darling lady. You know what it is about her? She reminds me more of my mother than anyone else I've known in the years since her passing. This woman just glows with the light and the warmth and the tenderness that characterized my mother all the days of her life. My mother had this sort of awe. The way I put it on Facebook the other day in trying to memorialize my mother for Mother's Day, she stood awestruck before the quotidian details of life. And Rachel Napal has that spirit about her. Abdu'l-Baha's spirit, the spirit of joy and wonderment and giving. And she has been struck by an illness whose name I do not know, which has felled her over and over again. And she has been so sick and in such pain, and she's never earned it for an instant. How can I trust God if he's doing this to her? If there is no Satan to interfere wickedly with the affairs of God, in whom I must admit I devoutly believe because I have to. I have to have some concept of Satan, which directly contradicts Baha'i teachings, but I can't explain what's being done to Rachel otherwise. I can't explain Abu Bakr Shakal, the fuckhead, the leader of this pseudo-Islamic group called Boko Haram. They call themselves, do you want to know what they call themselves? They think they're the congregation of the people of the Sunnah for dawah and jihad. That's the formal name of Boko Haram, the Nigerian jihadist group. They think they're Muslims. Those fools, those assholes think they're Muslims, and they've kidnapped Christian girls to sell in the slave markets because they think they interpret Quran Surah 4, Ayah 3 to believe that they can do that. I've learned a lot about the jihadist interpretation of the Quran. I felt the need to, because when September 11th happened, I was like, what the hell is this? How can people who say they believe in God have done this? Look at Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is direct evidence that either God is being fucked with by Satan, or God's sovereignty extends beyond anything we can even understand. It's because sometimes what appear to be the acts of God so blatantly and thoroughly and flagrantly contradict human notions of how a compassionate God would behave. It's a scandal is the word I was looking for. It's a scandal. So how can my faith in God be less than adulterated given this? I know people who will tell you this is God's mercy in another form. He works in mysterious ways. More power to them. I can't do that. I can't believe that. God has to be either less than entirely omnipotent, less than entirely omnibenevolent, or Satan's got to be fucking with him, or something. Something. Maybe the irreligious people are right. Irreligious people of various stripes would look at me and say, look, why are you, who conceives of the world this way, still a believer? Why can't you return to rationalism? Why can't you, for that matter, be a Reconstructionist where belief in the supernatural is optional? You know, and I stand abashed, ashen-faced before them saying, look, I don't know, but I got to keep doing what I'm doing, and I got to keep praying. I still pray. I still pray. I go to Jamal's devotional, or I sit here with this little book, and I say my 95 Allah's, and because the practice in the Baha'i community is, ideally you say the word Allah, which means glory be unto the most glorious, 95 times a day. And each one of my 95 is consecrated to an individual I love, or to a cause. You know, I pray for the Baha'is of Iran and Egypt. I pray for the Ahmadiyya Muslims of Pakistan and Bangladesh and Indonesia. I pray for Thai Buddhists who are being targeted by Muslims there. I pray for Muslims being targeted by Buddhists in Burma and vice versa. Who the fuck are these Buddhists? They think this is religion. You know what I mean? And I pray for these people. I pray for my friend Esther, my friend Sam, my friend Rachel, my friend Unji, my friend Ian, my friend Nosrat, my friend Crystal. All these people, my friend Jordan, my rapper friends, my friends of varying faith traditions. I go through the whole list until I get to 95. And I never, ever, ever run out of people before I get to 95 because I've been that blessed.
What are you most grateful for?
Oh, are you kidding? You should meet my friends. You should meet my friends. You should, I swear to you upon everything I've got. Even just one of my friends would show you something that would be immediately obvious why I should be grateful for them. My friend Sam Chapin, his tenderness, the way he lifts me up in hugs, and the way we discourse about theology, because he's a Jewish convert to Christianity, I'm a Jewish convert to the Baha'i faith. We're dialoguing all the time, and you know, everything about this guy and his warmth and sweetness and the tenderness he extends to his girlfriend and vice versa. My friend Origin, the Christian rapper, who's a much more devout and much more sincere and much truer religionist than I've ever been. The way he's forever, you know, working in aid of, you know, children in what we call priority neighborhoods as part of Young Street Mission. And the way he, even when we're interacting together, the way he is forever self-sacrificing. My friend Esther Townshend, who's also a liberal Christian, and her warmth and sweetness and the doggedness with which she's pursued her psychology degree, the better to be a social worker. You know, the work she does with marginalized folks, street-involved folks, women who've suffered abuse or addiction. These people, my friend Jamal, who hosts the Baha'i devotional, who sings these beautiful songs on his guitar, and who I can turn to in moments of crisis and say, I'm struggling with the Baha'i faith, and he'll offer words of support and words of comfort, and you know, this man's infinite tenderness. He's squat, he's shaped kind of like me, and you know, a round fella, and he gives these warm, tender hugs, and it's just the best thing in the world to be there for the devotional man. Veronica Robinson, a Baha'i of mixed black and white background, who reads prayers like you, and I mean, she's beautiful. So Veronica's eyes alone, I mean, why else be grateful? What other reason would you need to be grateful to God other than Veronica Robinson's eyes? But then she reads a prayer, and it's just, you know, these people, my father, for heaven's sake, as crazy as our relationship is, as many difficulties as I've had with him, he is well and truly beautiful. His spirit, he's like an old lion, man. My dad has endured so much and striven so hard to live a good life and struggled, and he's hurt a lot of people, including me, and I've hurt him, And, you know, over the years, we've had so many difficulties, but his spirit is indomitable and it is born of God. I'll tell you, he tries so hard and he's done such a wonderful job to raise me well. Just, I mean, then so I could go on at some length. You have to understand. I would take up the entirety of this interview just telling you about Victoria, the woman I fell in love with. That's a more wonderful person. You could search the world. There are points in the Baha'i scriptures that say, you know, you could traverse the four corners of the earth and never find one like unto me, speaking of himself as God, you know. Victoria, another ex of mine named Emmett, a friend of mine named Sakanya, whom I'd like to court, who won't quite let me, and of course I'll be her friend forever, I don't care. If well, all she needs is love and friendship, I'll make do. But, you know, the warmth and sweetness, the softness in her voice, the infinite tenderness. So, there are any number of such people. I could tell you the stories of several dozen, at least, individual human beings who are extraordinary.
What's your greatest wish?
That's not a question I understand how to answer, because I want very badly to live a good life. And to be nakedly honest about it, I want to find someone to share that good life with. I want to find someone who wants to be loved really well and love her really well for our whole lives. But I can't, you know, how dare I superimpose my dream upon the universe? I have to, maybe she's out there, maybe she isn't. And if she isn't, or even if she is and one day she walks away, company policy, right? You have to endure. It doesn't feel right to superimpose my greatest wish. You know, I'd love for us to get somewhere in, you know, universalizing the golden rule, and for the, you know, the governments of Iran and North Korea and Zimbabwe and etc. on down through the history of tyranny to be replaced by, you know, leaders who know what they're doing and who understand how love works. But who am I to say, right? And you talked about gratefulness. You know, you thought, what am I grateful for? Think about it. Just extrapolate for a second from all the people I've told you about who are so wonderful, on down to Otis Redding, John Darnielle, Bill Withers, Joanna Newsom, Ghostface Killer. You know, on down through Debussy and Schubert and Dr. King. There we go. Perfect example. Dr. King. I am so tremendously grateful to God for bringing us Dr. King and for letting Dr. King live as he lived, even if he left too early, and even if I'm unhappy that he left too early. Because if you listen to I've Been to the Mountaintop Lately, have you listened to that sermon? It's so miraculous. It's so wonderful. He understood so much about what it means to be a human being. And this is what I mean when I talk about every one of us having the capacity on a level of the soul to be wonderful and to actualize wonderful qualities, which, after all, Abdul-Baha talks about this being the purpose of human life, to acquire and develop virtues in the Spirit of God, in harmony with the Spirit of God. Think about what Dr. King did. Dr. King, Brother Malcolm, Mahmoud Muhammad Taha, Rabia Kadir, the leader of the Uyghurs, Aung San Suu Kyi and Win Tin in Burma. You know, all these individuals, extraordinary individuals. Something's there, something's up. I'm grateful for them. They've given us this legacy of speaking truth to power, living well, giving love, sacrificing ourselves in pursuit of virtue. That's, you know, I'm grateful as hell for that. I'm grateful for a little song called Trouble in My Way by the Dixie Hummingbirds. Trouble in my way, gotta cry sometimes. Trouble in my way, Lord, gotta cry sometimes. Trouble in my way, Lord, gotta cry sometimes. The good Lord will take me by and by. Now blessed are the pure in heart, for I know that they'll see God. I mean, you talk to the people with the devotional, and they will tell you, I go in on this song almost every Sunday. And I worry about it because I don't want to be an egoist, but I fucking let fly. I will sing. I will sing, bruh. I will do it. I will sing. And, I'm grateful for that song, that little thing that they recorded in 1952. Them brothers just went in and gave us this beautiful artifact. Sam Cooke, ain't that good news? Cat Stevens, I think I see the light. Whoever he became later on, however wrong he was about Salman Rushdie, he gave us that song. I'm grateful. God damn. You know what I'm saying?
Do you have a message?
Well, yes and no. No, because the notion that I am worthy to deliver a message is arrogant on its face, I think. And I don't want to self-aggrandize, you know what I mean? Like, I want to be honest and forthright and not, place too much value on who I am, what I do. I want to be real and frank before God. But beyond a certain point, very obviously, the message is love. The message is warmth. The message is tenderness. The message is sweetness. I try to give, to show forth as much love and warmth and tenderness and sweetness in the world as I can. I like to be warm and tender and sweet, and then also intelligent and discerning. And I would encourage whomever is watching, listening, seeing this to do the best job they can of combining those traits in their own lives. I mean, everyone's going to have different sorts, forms, flavors, expressions that it takes, but it's always worth it to give more love. Always worth it to, show forth more warmth, more tenderness, more affection. And as long as, the people in your life want it and need it, there's always that company policy, right? Company policy being that you love people in accordance with their needs. But if what they want from you is love, then nothing is to be lost. Nothing is to be, there can only be wonderment. There can only be joy in more love. And if you recognize that on the level of the soul, every person individually has the capacity to be wonderful, and you try to nurture that capacity and recognize that capacity and treat the people in your life with that understanding, then good will come to you. I know it because good has come to me. Not to be, not to represent myself as somehow good or having done a good job of this, but this is the way I have tried to live, and the fruits I have reaped, the rewards I have reaped, are that, I have wonderful people in my life, and I try to give good love and live well, and in return, I've received good love in return. So, and I'll bet you every single person watching this, every single person who views this clip or what have you, will be able to think immediately of a person they love with everything, or will be able to think of some experience they've had or some aspect of what it is to be alive in the world that they cherish beyond everything, that they love the way I love Abdul Baha or Dr. King or my friends Esther and Sam and Tori, etc. And I would just encourage them to hold that close and to live with that knowledge and live with that understanding, because virtually everyone you encounter is going to be deserving of love. Virtually everyone you encounter is going to be deserving of the best you can give them. And you have to, use rational discernment to figure out how best to give that love and whether it's merited and necessary in all circumstances and situations. But on balance, the great majority of situations you're going to find yourself in, it's worth it to express that love. And just hold it close, hold it close, man. The spirit of life, what Baha'is call the spirit of life. I was on a website once, and I ran across, how people have profiles on websites. I ran across a website where a Baha'i girl was talking about the soul, and she said, the soul is that part of us that shines and makes us feel warm. And I believe in the soul. I think that we're all equal on the level of the soul. And if you remember that part in you that shines with that capacity for tenderness, warmth, affection, and then you combine that tenderness, warmth, affection with intelligence and with discernment and with work to whatever capacity you have, in as much capacity as you have, to do right by the people around you, then you will do well in the world. You will live well. Most of us can. This was a central realization that I had to come to in order to decide that it was not the right thing to die. That when I was in hospital, I fought it off for a long time, believing that the love I could give wasn't enough. But I have to believe it's enough because I have to continue to live for my father, my brother, my friends, for God. And what it comes to is an understanding that love is going to win. Love will out. God's truth will out and love will out. And as long as we live with love and do the best we can to think carefully, to discern, to treat others with kindness, warmth, tenderness, affection, then we will be okay. If you live this way, you're gonna make it, irrespective of who you are, irrespective of how you're suffering. Whoever's seeing this, I wish you all the best, man. You know what I'm saying? I wish you warmth and good. I extend my goodwill because Abdul Baha says, to see the joy of divine gladness on your faces is the cause of my happiness. That's my happiness, man, is to see people happy, to see people living well. So if you see this, I'm the mighty Rhino and I wish you well, man. God be with you and God's joy upon you. God's joy, his mercy and his tenderness, I'm saying though.
And when I show the video to people, or show the portrait we're going to make of you, what do you want people to know about you most?
Well, it's for individual people to discern what they make of me, to determine, whether they find value in watching what I've brought to the table or whatever. I try to be frank about the fact that I try to give good love, and I'm trying to make great music, and I'm trying to live an honorable, a decent, a virtuous life. And, I do love me some God, so, otherwise you wouldn't be doing this portrait. I love God, and God's kindness, I think, is infinite and what have you. So those things are true. But beyond that, it's up to the individual observer to decide whether they think I'm, bringing something to the table that they value or bringing something to the table that they would prefer to ignore. That's on them, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's what it is, But I'm the mighty Rhino, I'm the mighty Rhino at your service.
Should we finish with something musical, rap?
Sure. Well, you asked me to perform that what do you call it? This company policy song, the song I wrote for my dear beloved ex, who was very dear to me in my heart, and who left me, and I sort of had to work through that. So I'll just do it. It's as if somebody bottled the sun. Only way I can possibly sum up what I thought we'd become, and we was awfully young, so it was probably dumb, but Lord knows we had ourselves an astonishing run. Wasn't just erotica lust, we was longing for love, and we was real, because honesty is as honesty does. Remember that first day, just talking from dawn to the dusk. Barely let go of you long enough to get onto the bus. Them eyes you got, lady, with that gaze you can hold, wasn't nothing quite like it on the face of the globe. I remember, I used to sit and watch you play with my baby niece, gaze at you in my bed as you lay asleep. Sun poking through the blinds at dawn, jealous, like as nothing she'd rather shine upon. Them moments brought me closer to transcendence than I've ever been. So that's something I still revel in, Oh, don't you know, it's company policy, baby. It's company policy, baby. Just the way I've learned to love. It's company policy, baby. It's the way I make my peace. It's in my soul. Do you want the whole thing? Do you want the whole song? There's two more verses.
Yeah.
I'll do the thing. All right, well, cool. Got a lot of my dogs thinking I'm strange. This girl left you, why you got a song singing her praise? Why you ain't livid with rage, cussing her out? I tell them, cause that ain't actually what love is about. Sometimes I want to attack and be savagely cruel, but my heart doesn't have the capacity to. And you did what yours asked you to do, so how I'm fit to be mad because we can't rekindle the thing that we had. Sometimes I think you wish I thought you was a raggedy, so you would have felt better about having a split. That's the glorious part, because it probably could have torn me apart if I just wasn't born with that sort of heart. You ain't my honey dove now, that'll be what it be. Love ain't something that dies, girl, at least if you're me. Still care about you. Even through all the stress and regrets, because a life without love is no better than death. Oh, don't you know? It's company policy, baby. Company policy, baby. Just the way I've learned to love. It's company policy, baby. It's the way I make my peace, it's in my soul. Certain joyous feeling I get at the thought of you. Couldn't destroy or steal a record if you wanted to. You probably do. At least if you still sipping on that bitter broth you brewed. Knocked it through your conscience askew. Something I can't figure out how to parse. You let me come and help recover your love of self, then you kick me out your heart. Maybe it's crazy to say it. I wouldn't even say Nathan abrasive if I had the patience for hatred. Because, girl, you better listen. You're one of the most beautiful poems that the Blessed Eternal has ever written. I know you think it's better to reject the praise, but you'll go to your grave somebody I treasure and respect, even if we never speak again. I hope you live a life you can find inner light and pleasure and free of men. Blessings and meaning, and that's how I feel, and it's so true that I'm letting my people know too. Oh, don't you know? It's company policy, baby. It's company policy, baby. Just the way I've learned to love. Whoa, company policy, baby. It's the way I make my peace. It's in my soul. Now, because company policy, and then what I'm telling you about warmth and tenderness, and then, let your heart burn with loving kindness, the things Abdul Baha is expressing, and all the way through from all the people and things that are brought up in this conversation, from Dr. King to Bill Withers to the Dixie Hummingbirds to the Mountain Goats, all through, and certainly also my friends and my family. It's a unified thread, it's a unified whole, which is that the focus is always on love. The focus is always on tenderness. The focus is always on warmth. The focus is always on affection. It's always on what more can I do to bring more love into the world than there was before I got here? What more can I do to contribute a vision of beauty, of truth, and of love, of kindness, On some level, that's how everybody does it. That's how everybody sees it. Particularly most of the religionists of the world, that's us. That's what we try to do. That's how we try to honor God. And that's what I'm trying to do. You know what I'm saying? I'm the Mighty Rhino at your service. Look me up, man. I'm the Mighty Rhino. And I'm so honored to have been part of this. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. A blessing.
Man, a blessing for me too, man. God's joy upon you.
Thank you, Noah.